Welcome. Thank you for being here with us. We are excited to get to celebrate these seniors today. And so the last couple of weeks, months, I've been thinking about today and thinking about, these kids that are going off and graduating. And so, of course, I start to think about when I went off. And after I graduated high school, I went off to Baylor University, Sikkim, and I loved it. And we could be here all day, which I'm sure, it may be still raining outside. Some of you want to stay all day. We would be here all day if I told you all of the different things, the events, the people that marked and helped make me who I am today that I experienced in my college years. But you probably want to eat at some point, and we don't have enough food for everybody unless Jesus continues to multiply. So I'll just stick to one person. And I met this person my very first week at Baylor. At Baylor, we have this thing called Welcome Week, where you go and you're thrown together with a bunch of other freshmen. So you're kind of like deer in headlights all together. They like to keep that together. And what you do is you kind of learn what this thing you just have gotten yourself into called college is. And so I met some really great friends that would be my friends for the rest of my college career. And you do silly things like throw yourself off a perfectly good cliff into Lake Whitney. You experience cafeteria food together for the first time. And I will say, soft serve at Memorial never disappointed. But there was this one person I met, and his name was Matt Davis. And Matt Davis grew up in the Waco area. His dad was a pastor, but also led this Christian school that his mom taught at and that Matt had gone to. And so Matt had this incredible biblical knowledge. And I was still very much a baby in my faith at that time, and so I loved to talk to Matt. And I would just ask him questions, and I would just take him the new scripture that I had just found, and he would help me understand it. And we would talk about what I would later find out is called theology, because we would talk about the study of God. And then there was this really amazing thing about Matt. He had been a part of miracles. He had seen actual miracles transpire in his life. And so I just wanted to be around him and just soak up all this Jesus goodness. But Matt did this thing that I don't get. When he went to college, he decided to walk away from the Lord. That he was kind of been there, done that with the whole Jesus thing, and he wanted to live for himself. He wanted to find freedom. And so he walked away. And I don't get that. That makes no sense to me, because I had been there, done that from the world's perspective, and I knew that it was lacking. And so I don't understand those who know the Lord, have seen his hand in their life, know his word, and choose to walk away. I don't get that, and it saddens me, and that's part of why I do what I do. I feel called to share life with teenagers in hopes that they won't follow Matt Davis. But this isn't a new phenomenon. And people have been walking away from the Lord for thousands and thousands of years. And I have conversations with people, and they're like, you know what, Debbie, if it were different, if God were still tangible, still doing miracles like he did back in the Old Testament, if I could see him, then it would be different. I would be different. And so I started thinking about that, and I think about that a lot because there are people who have seen God, have seen his miracles, and yet still walked away. We've got the Israelites who they had only known slavery in Egypt. They'd been enslaved there under harsh conditions, working under the brutal Egyptian sun and the slave drivers. They had horrible work conditions. Until one day their work conditions got even worse when Pharaoh's daughter's son, Moses, came back and demanded that Pharaoh let the Israel people go and worship the Lord in the desert. They got to see these amazing miracles transpire. They were there when things got really interesting. They got to see when the Nile turned to blood. They got to see the infestation of frogs and then gnats and then flies. They got to see the plague on the Egyptian livestock, the boils on men's skin, the devastating hail and the locusts, the plague of darkness. And then they even got to see the unthinkable, the death of the firstborn of all the Egyptians. But they experienced deliverance from that because of the blood of the Lamb. They experienced the presence of God. In Exodus 13, 21 through 22, it says, "By day the Lord went ahead of the Israelites in a pillar of cloud to guide them, and on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people." These are the ones that even benefited from having constant provision from the Lord. He gave them water. He gave them manna. He gave them quail in the desert, where none of that should have been. They experienced God's power, His presence, His protection, and His provision. And yet, they walked away. Throughout that desert trek, God continued to reveal Himself over and over again. And yet, over and over again, the people grumbled. They doubted. And then with their hearts, they walked away, even though they had tangibly seen God. They had been a part of the divine. Something miraculous happened in their midst, and yet they walked away. But then there's Joshua. I love Joshua. I've been hanging out with Joshua the last couple of weeks, getting to know him better, just so I could stand up here and talk about him almost like he's my friend. I want to be like Joshua. Joshua, we first meet him in Exodus 17. He gets to be commander. It says, "The Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, 'Choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands.' So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side, one on the other, so that his hands remained steady till sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Write this on a scroll as something to be remembered, and make sure that Joshua hears it, because I will completely blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven.'" I love this story. One, because Israelite who had been slaves, the kind of this ragtag group of people wandering in the desert, go up against the Amalekites. Josephus talks about the Amalekites, and he says that they're a very warlike people, the most warlike people in that area. So it's kind of like the Bad News Bears going up against the unbeatable. And they go, and as long as Moses has his hands up, the Israelites are winning. But when he gets tired, they begin to lose. And so they get smart, just prop Moses' arms up, and Joshua gets the victory. But the thing that I like the most about this story is that God says to Moses, write this on a scroll as something to be remembered, and make sure that Joshua hears it. I love this because God not only provides a miracle of victory for the Israelites, but he knows his people. He knows their temperament. He knows their aptitude to forget what he has so graciously done. And so he says, write this down so that they can remember. And be sure to tell Joshua. Make sure that Joshua, who was not only a part of the miracle, make sure he knows whose miracle it is. It belongs to the Lord. Help him to remember that. Help make sure that he knows what's happening here. And you can go through the rest of the story. We see glimpses of Joshua pop up from time to time as they are wandering in the desert. We hear him mentioned in Exodus 24, that he actually gets to go up with Moses on the Mount of Sinai, where Moses is up there for 40 days and 40 nights meeting with the Lord and receives the law of God and even details of how to worship. And as they're up on that mountain, that's when the people, they start to get a little antsy. And they're like, man, Moses has been gone a really long time. God is clearly there. We can see that. Maybe we should start to do our own thing. We're bored. I know. Let's just put like a bunch of gold together, like burn it up and see what happens. And make a calf to worship. A calf versus the one true God who has provided, protected, shown his power and his presence. Let's worship a calf because that makes sense. And so while they're doing that, this noise rises in the camp. And this is what I love. Joshua, he hears that noise. And he says in Exodus 32:17, when Joshua heard the noise of the people shouting, he said to Moses, there is sound of war in the camp. There is sound of war in the camp. And Moses corrects him. He's like, no, it's not actually sound of war. And he has this whole little poem that he says. But Joshua was right. It was the sound of war. The same war that we fight in our hearts today. The war of worshiping the one true God or worshiping the other. The war of recognizing who should sit on the throne of our lives versus some of the things that we erect instead, even ourselves at times. There is war. And then we see Joshua again in Numbers 13. He's one of the 12 spies that goes and spies out the promised land to go see what goods there is, to see what kind of people are there, what they're going to be up against. And Joshua, along with Caleb, goes against the majority. Instead of going along with the majority that said, yeah, it's good, but the people there are going to kill us. We're like grasshoppers in their sight. We don't stand a chance. It's good, but right here it's fine. Whereas Joshua remembered. God said, that is our land. God said, I will provide. God said, I will be with you. And so Joshua stood against the majority. Instead of giving in to what was just going with the flow of the rest of his people, he stood and said, no, we got this. We can do this. God is with us. We need not fear, for he is with us. He stood against the grain. He went against the rest of the people because he knew God. But the thing that I want us to look at today is one more moment with Joshua. Kind of Joshua's graduation, if you will, since that's what we're celebrating here today. It's when Joshua graduates from being the aide of Moses to being the leader in charge. Joshua, he had been there. He had seen all of these things. He had been in captivity. He had been in the wandering. And now God was calling him to raise up and to lead this new generation. The old generation who had grumbled and complained and doubted God, they were gone. A new generation was coming up. Moses has just passed away. And before he passes away, he lays his hands on Joshua and prays the spirit of wisdom, God's spirit, to be on him. And so Joshua graduates from being taught to leading. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn with me to Joshua 1. It's here that Joshua has the choice. Joshua could have done a million different things. He could have taken the opportunity to seek after false gods like everybody else and lead the people astray. He could have taken the approach that he had been there, done that, about the God thing, and walked away, making his own God. Joshua could have just lived for himself, the way he desired, pursuing the things that he wanted, what he thought would bring him pleasure and gratification, and left the people to fend for themselves. Joshua could have pulled a Matt Davis and sought after what he thought was freedom. But Joshua didn't. Joshua made a choice. And his choice was to continue following the will and the way of God. Joshua 1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the great sea on the west. No one will be able to stand up against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their forefathers to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua had a choice. Just like we all have a choice. Joshua got to see the power, the presence, the protection, and the provision of the Lord, just like the other Israelites had. They had seen God and yet walked away. They had seen him intercede on their behalf time and time again. They had been given his law. They knew him and yet pursued other things. And here's Joshua with all his friends that he had grown up with are now gone. And he stands at this opportunity and he has a choice. Will I follow where they went, or will I follow where God has me to go? Be strong and courageous. He chooses that day whom he will serve. He led the people into the promised land. He led them into battle. It wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy life he chose. But it was true life, true freedom that he got to walk in. He led the people into battle to take the possession of God's promise, and Joshua died at the age of 110, which 110 in the Egyptian culture, that was the perfect lifespan. To me, that seems way too long. I don't know what you do at 110. I'm thinking 50 sounds good. Sorry, honey, take the kids. But he lived to be 110, and that was the perfect lifespan. That was seen as divine, like a divine provision for him to live that exact amount of time. And Joshua did live a divinely inspired life. He lived a life that showed who God is, that echoed who he had been following, Moses, and continued to echo throughout generations. He left an incredible legacy to his people. And I know some of you are going to sit there and be like, yeah, Debbie, that's great. It's a great story. Heard it. Heard about the miracles, heard about God's presence, heard about all of this. But what about now? What about me now? And while we don't witness the same miracles that Joshua witnessed, there are miracles that happen around us every day. We get to see the miracle of a beloved church member healed from cancer. We get to see the miracle of new life in a brand new baby. We get the miracle of hearing just the right sermon at just the right time. We get to see the miracle of a friend being baptized into the faith. We get to witness the miracle of somebody making that phone call at just the right time. With our eyes wide open, we can see the divine intersect in the daily. Because God is still working miracles. He is still speaking to us, just like it was written down about the Amalekites, so that the people would remember what God had done. We have written and at our disposal all that God has done, who he is, who he's calling us to be, for us to remember. remember who we belong to. So, the challenge for graduates today is for you to not graduate away from your faith, to not walk away from the one who came to save you, but to take this new adventure as an opportunity to continue to be strong and courageous in your faith. And it may mean going against the majority. It may mean standing out and standing up. It may mean denying yourself things that you think you may want, earthly freedoms. But I'll tell you, as one who has gone before you, and I'm no authority, I'm just one life, it's worth it. It's so very worth it. And for the rest of us, the challenge for us is to do the same, to not be terrified or discouraged, for the Lord our God is with us. He is with us wherever we go. It is for us to remember to open our eyes, to look for the divine in the daily. It is for us to remember He is the one true God, alone to be worshiped. He is the one who should sit on the throne. He is worthy. So I close with, may all of us live a Joshua kind of faith, a divinely inspired life, a life that has truly been set free, and who knows what kind of incredible legacy we can leave behind. Let's pray. Sweet Jesus God, thank you so much for who you are. God, I love you and fall more in love with you each and every day. God, and I pray that for everyone in this room. I pray that especially for these graduating seniors, that they be so in love with you that any and everything else pale in comparison. God, thank you for Joshua. Thank you that he stood for you. God, thank you that even though everyone else had fallen away, he did not. That he went against the majority and sunk deeper into the divine. God, I truly do pray that you help us to have eyes wide open to see the divine in our daily lives and to live inspired lives, not for our glory, but for yours. Not so that people want to come and be our friend, but so that we can point them to you. You are the greatest friend because you laid down your life for us. It's in Jesus Christ's name I pray.